going to stand over here and introduce our speaker, so all that you gentlemen do not watch her reposition herself up here. She learned that climbing ladders is not her strong suit, so her leg's broken in 6 places, 8 places. I met Millie West 30 minutes ago. I got a call maybe 8 months ago from her agent, and her agent is the one that set us up with Ken Berger about 2 years ago, another author. So Millie West is an author, but let me tell you a little bit more about her. She graduated from Gaffney High School. She is a bona fide Gamecock. She went to USC and she majored in English. And as do such a huge percentage of English majors, she went into aviation when she graduated. I think that'll be part of her story. She flew UPS freight planes. And then she left that and she had her own real estate company called Portfolio over in the Chapin, Lexington area, which she sold in 2010, and now she is an author. She's written 2 books. Now, I don't read fiction. I read it once a year. My church lets me go off to the mountains for about a month, and that's the one time a year I read fiction. But this year I didn't do it because of my mother's illness. And so I started a couple nights ago, and last night I was up till 1 o'clock reading Catherine's Cross. And if you, the whole setting is in the Low Country. You know, and I was sort of excited because one of the restaurants where the hero and heroine went, you know, my wife had been there. And if any of you are married and go to Charleston, you all know where King Street is. King Street surfaced here. But anyway, it was pretty gripping and had me turning the pages. She is married. She has a 24-year-old daughter who is working on a master's at USC. She has a 15-year-old son who is at Chapin High School. And what else do I know about her? Let's see, everything. Oh yeah, I asked her, I told her I was so impressed with the paintings on the front of her novels because they're originals by a guy named Rick Reinert, who has an office on King Street, and I just thought that was so fascinating. So anyway, without further ado, I want you to give a warm Spring Valley Rotary welcome to my new friend, Millie West.
Thank you for having me. Can everyone hear me okay?
Oh, yeah.
And as George said, my advice is to stay off ladders. On Memorial Day, I was outside my house and I was cleaning it with a hose trying to get some spider webs down, and a wasp flew into my face. So I tried to come down very quickly, but it was a very bad idea. So when I landed flat and I heard my knee go pop. And it turned out that I broke it and dislocated my knee, and I'm still not weight bearing, but I'm hoping that come Monday I'll get some good news about that. So here, we'll get started. Psychological motivation plays an important part in my writing. The heroines in my novels, Catherine's Cross and The Castnet, show courage and independence as they delve into what I'd like to call uncharted territory. Both leave their established lives, go to new places, and find themselves in unfamiliar and at times dangerous situations where they use their wits and character strengths to overcome adversity. When I was a little girl, there was something that intrigued me about people who show courage under pressure, and even in tense situations solve their problems intelligently. Who remembers the 1960s television show Johnny Quest? Ah, yes, good. A lot of times nobody's even heard of it, but it was a cartoon by Hanna-Barbera, and I loved it. It was supposedly created for children, but the show was so intelligent, I think it was meant for adults as well. I confess the writing in the Johnny Quest show had a huge impact on me. You may recall Johnny was the son of a scientist, Benton Quest, who did special work for the U.S. government. This work was often of a secretive nature, and there was mention that Dr. Quest might have worked for the Secret Service or maybe the CIA. Johnny and his friend Haji accompanied Dr. Quest all over the world on his assignments. There were unexplainable creatures, experiments gone awry, aviation, and lots of adventure. The main characters were honorable, and there was a certain fearlessness I admired about them. Most people would have fled from such situations. I think this affected my future writing because my heroines bravely take on serious challenges. Then there was Race Bannon. Race was Dr. Quest's bodyguard and pilot. I see you back there smiling. Race could fly any airplane. He was a fabulous marksman. He was smart, and he was very handsome. And even at the age of 6, I knew how exceptional he was. I had quite a crush on him. I really liked the episodes that dealt with aviation, and I took that admiration of flying with me as I grew older. My dream of becoming a pilot came true. I became a commercial pilot, and I flew for United Parcel Service. Writing is that powerful. When I was 18, I began college at the University of South Carolina. I found that I especially enjoyed studying literature. I think my favorite class was Shakespeare's tragedies. We dug into the importance of words and how Shakespeare often repeated certain phrases in his plays. My professor was a highly gifted scholar, and I think he helped me to think deeper about life and literature. And at that time, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. So majoring in English literature was a good choice for an undergraduate degree. One semester, I studied Russian literature. After class one afternoon, I told my professor I'd like to be a fiction writer. We sat down in front of the Humanities building on the USC campus, and he told me that to be a good writer, he thought you had to live a while. Experience life was how he put it. So I put my thoughts of being a writer on hold, but I never gave up on my dream. During my senior year of college, I took flying lessons at Owens Field in Columbia. I'm sure Race Bannon had something to do with it. I loved to fly, and I earned my private pilot's license. That was 30 years ago, and I remember that it was very difficult to gain acceptance from some of the other male pilots. At the time, there were still former World War II pilots working in aviation. The man who taught me how to fly, Bob Tolhurst, had flown the P-51 Mustang, which is a single-engine high-performance fighter in China against Japanese forces. To tell you the truth, the older pilots from the World War II era were much more supportive and friendly than pilots my own age. Well, I was hooked on aviation. I received my commercial, instrument, and twin-engine ratings. I was fortunate to get a job flying a Piper Saratoga for a local construction company. Then I got a job in Charlotte, North Carolina, flying for Sunbird Airlines, which was a commuter airline. I had a lot of fun while working there. My big break came when I got a job flying with Orion Air. I was flight engineer on the Boeing 727, and Orion did contract work for United Parcel Service. I was in the right place at the right time. UPS decided to form their own flight department, and I was in the very first class. I was one of the first women hired. I worked for UPS for several years. However, I found staying up all night to be very hard on my body. When I was 30, my husband and I decided to start our own family, and my daughter Whitney was born the next year. I left UPS, but I continued to fly part-time for the University of South Carolina's athletic department. I thought about writing from time to time, but family and life happened. I had the idea for the castnet in my head even way back then. For the next 16 years, I worked as a realtor. First with a large independent company, then as broker in charge of my own company, Portfolio Real Estate. I worked in the Lake Murray area around Columbia. It takes great discipline to write. As you see with my own life, you must consciously carve out time to write, and I didn't do that in the beginning. The setting for both my novels is the low country of South Carolina. Over 20 years ago, my husband and I started going to the low country to hunt and fish. I had never shot a gun or done any serious fishing, but that was all about to change. I confess that I'm still not a very good shot with a shotgun, but I am a pretty good fisherman. When I wasn't fishing with my husband, I would go out and explore the areas around Charleston, Edisto, Beaufort, and I would talk to local people. And that's how I came to love the low country. Now let's go back to the courageous spirit I admired from an early age. You see, every life is a story. Everything you experience influences your craft. I touched on this earlier, but I'd like to delve deeper. In The Castnet and Catherine's Cross, the heroines of both novels leave their established lives and relocate to an unfamiliar place. Mills Taylor in The Castnet leaves New York City to find a simpler life in the low country of South Carolina. She is hired as the director of a scholarship foundation geared to help young people advance their lives through education. However, she encounters unexpected dangers and challenges. I like the fact that she experiences character growth as she comes to understand people different from herself. In Catherine's Cross, the heroine, Jinx Ellington, leaves the comfort of a teaching position in Raleigh, North Carolina, and moves to Beaufort, South Carolina, this after she loses her identical twin sister, Gigi. Soon after Gigi's death, someone breaks into her Port Royal home and ransacks it. Jinx bravely investigates her sister's life and uncovers hidden secrets that are revelatory. The castnet is set in the Edisto area and in Charleston. And the hero in the novel, Cooper Heath, is in the maritime shipping trade. So Charleston is the perfect place for Heath Brothers shipping. His family was also some of the first settlers in the Charleston area, coming from Barbados and helping to create the planter class. For Cooper, his family's past has both positives and negatives. On the positive side, he is proud of the successes of his ancestors and is purchasing back properties lost by his family after the Civil War. However, Cooper and his mother before him recognized societal injustices rooted in the planter system. Their goal, to help those stuck in a cycle of poverty better their lives through education. In Catherine's Cross, an object of value lost during the Civil War is located by a diver in South Carolina waters near St. Helena Sound. I think setting the novel in Beaufort supports the story concerning the recovery of artifacts. Ancient spirit bottles often ended up in waterways, and hobby divers have recovered some of them. I've seen them for sale in Beaufort. Setting is important because it sets the tone and can often be a character on its own. Both novels are full of references to actual places in the Low Country. Who's been to the Shrimp Shack on St. Helena Island? A few hands? Yay! How about Coffin Point? In Beaufort, yes. I also had fun creating fictitious places. For instance, the town where the castnet is primarily set is Alston Station, South Carolina. There really isn't an Alston Station on the Edisto River, but there should be. I use that town because it's named after Joseph Alston, a former governor of South Carolina. Joseph Alston was married to Theodosia Burr Alston, Aaron Burr's daughter. Burr was vice president under Thomas Jefferson, and you may recall that he shot Alexander Hamilton in a duel. In 1812, Theodosia vanished while on a voyage from Winyah Bay, Georgetown, South Carolina, to New York. Theodosia's disappearance is compared to the fate of a character in the castnet, Elise Heath. In Catherine's Cross, I enjoyed creating a fictitious hunt club named the Rabbit Hash Hunt Club. The club is housed in the Tabby Wall Chapel that at one time was a chapel of ease for the French family whose plantation was between Beaufort and Hilton Head. In my novel, the hunt club got the name because during the Depression, local hunters donated rabbits to be made into hash to feed the poor. I actually got the name Rabbit Hash from a small community in Kentucky. I just liked the name. I'd like to share this story with you. Earlier this year, Beaufort County Sheriff P.J. Tanner presented Catherine's Cross at the book Sandwiched In series in Beaufort. While I was writing the novel, I was concerned about the realism in the presentation of the hero, Seth Mason, who was a detective with the Sheriff's Department, who is a detective, I should say. Sheriff Tanner read my manuscript and helped me authenticate my character. I felt proud when he said he considered Seth one of his deputies, and I thought he did a wonderful job presenting the novel. After the program was over, I was leaving the auditorium, and a lady stopped me in the hall. I don't know how many of you have read Catherine's Cross yet, but in the novel, the portrait of a Civil War era resident of Beaufort hangs in the Gibbs Museum in Charleston. Her name is Iris Elliott. The lady had gone to the museum to see the portrait, and she had asked a guide to help her find it. It's not really there, but I was really excited that the book had made such a strong impression on her that she had actually gone to the museum to see it. So, how did I finally begin my writing career? After working for years as a realtor, the market began to slow in 2007, as many of you know. I can't complain about my time in real estate. I had a good run of it for a number of years. Well, with the real estate market crunch, I had time I hadn't had before to sit down and write. It was about 30 years after I had had the conversation with my Russian literature professor, and I felt like I had experienced life enough to write about it. There is a great deal of South Carolina history in both novels, and I read at least 25 books to help me get the history correct. As I said earlier, I had the castnet in my mind for a number of years, but once I started working on it, I felt compelled to write about things that concern me. The characters of Leroy Mullinax and his poor wife Eula represent the terrible domestic violence problem we have in this country, and especially in South Carolina. The castnet symbolizes reaching out to help others. I came up with Catherine's Cross while I was working on the castnet. While reading about the federal occupation of the Beaufort area during the Civil War, I had this idea. What if a highly valuable artifact, in this case lost during the Civil War, was found by a diver? What would be the repercussions to the person who discovered the artifact and the people close to the treasure seeker? Catherine's Cross explores this premise. Now I'd like to change gears a bit and talk to you about the grab factor. I mean grabbing someone's attention at the beginning of a book. One of the first people to read the castnet was my dentist. The next time I saw him, I asked him if he enjoyed the book. He said yes, but he said he didn't think he was going to at first. I asked him why, and he said because no one died at the beginning. So in Catherine's Cross, I had an important character die in the first couple of pages, and I told him I did it just for him. In the meantime, my publisher got some feedback that the castnet needed a stronger beginning. So we went back and we tweaked the opening pages. Now I want to read both beginnings to you, and I want you all to tell me which one you prefer. I'm not going to tell you which one was the first one or which one we changed it to. Okay. The castnet, prologue. Low, misty clouds obscured the James Island side of the Ashley River as Mills stood at the railing of the promenade at Charleston's Battery. In the distance, Fort Sumter appeared for only a moment and then was hidden again by low clouds. High winds created drifts of snow along the promenade and chilled her as she looked across the water. The Charleston Dispatch had reported that the snowfall would give the Low Country its first white Christmas in modern history. In her heart, she felt a sense of peace. To her, the snow brought a cleansing rebirth to a community that had suffered so much. During the past several months, she had witnessed human agony and despair, but during the same time period, she had seen examples of kindness and self-sacrifice that brought only hope to her soul. She thought of her reasons for moving to Charleston. While having been established and successful advertising agent in New York City, she had learned of an educational foundation to help young people escape bonds of poverty. She committed herself to the idea of becoming the foundation's director, having achieved her own higher education objectives through the philanthropy of other people. She wanted to help individuals achieve their goals. Mills remembered the first time she learned about the foundation and its executor, Cooper Heath. She had been intrigued. Okay, that's one. Here's the other. Chapter 1, Discovery, December 1988. Mills jumped back toward the curb as a speeding taxi ran a red light and came within inches of hitting her. Losing her balance, she slipped on slush from yesterday's snowstorm. It had been the first snow in December and had caught most of New York City by surprise. As she fell, Mills lost hold of her briefcase and landed on her hands and knees. She heard a man with a Bronx accent yell at the driver, "Okay, now keep in mind that I have lived in South Carolina all my life and I'm going to try a Bronx accent here, okay? Hey, look where you're going." The morning rush hour traffic pushed by her to cross the street, and she couldn't get to her feet before a man and two women stepped over her. She crawled out of the street, back onto the sidewalk, but her path was blocked by a pair of worn brown work boots caked in salty grime. The next thing she knew, Mills was on her feet, being supported by a burly construction worker. He was wearing a metal safety hat on his head. "Hey, lady, you okay? That cabbie almost run you over." Mills' knees were shaking from the fall as she stammered, "Yes, thank you for your help." He bent over, picked up her briefcase, and handed it to her. "Now watch these New York cabbies," he said with a smile. Before she could say another word, he turned and crossed the street with the light. Mills brushed the wet snow from her pants, took a deep breath, and crossed 6th Avenue. As she reached her office building on West 57th, a strong gust of wind whipped between the buildings, blowing snow from window ledges into the air. The powder descended to the ground as twinkling ice crystals, glittering in the early morning sun. When the air cleared from the blowing snow, Mills saw the red flashing lights of an ambulance that was underneath the front portico of her building. She froze in place. Which one do you like better?
Second.
Okay, that's what we changed it to. And hopefully it has more of a grab factor. So, keeping in mind that I changed, or rather, I wrote the beginning of this just for my dentist, Rudy Harrington. See if this grabs you. Catherine's Cross, Chapter 1, The Dark Hours. Just before 1 in the afternoon, when Jinx was watering her ferns, she felt a strange sensation run through her body, like a chill that went to her bones. She'd had these feelings before. Both Jinx and her identical twin, Gigi, experienced them when they sensed the other was in trouble. Their mother called these instincts a gift. God has given you two the ability to look out for one another, she would say. This time, the chill gripped her more intensely than ever before. She reached for the telephone and dialed Gigi's phone. The answering machine picked up. Gigi's cheerful voice said, "Leave a message and I'll call you back." When she dialed her sister's cell phone, she was forwarded to voicemail. "The owner of this cell phone is unavailable." Jinx left a short message. "Gigi, please call me as soon as you get this." For the rest of the afternoon, Jinx could not stop thinking of her sister, and her continued attempts to reach her by telephone were met with failure. Just before midnight, the doorbell rang at her home. She cautiously walked to the threshold and asked, "Who is it?" "Jinx, it's Mom and Greg. Please open the door." When she opened the door, fear rushed through her limbs as she looked into her mother's eyes. She knew immediately what was wrong. Would you want to know more? I hope so. Okay. Now, I want to read just a little bit the front of the novel that I'm working on. It is the sequel to The Castnet. So to really know what's going on and what I'm going to read, you had to know how this ended. But I want to see if you feel like this grabs you. Chapter 1. Okay, I'm going to go back. At this point, I'm going to name the novel of Sun and Rain. And here's the first 3 pages. Chapter 1, The Gale, November 1989. This is a French accented voice, the first voice you hear, okay? Maybe it'll be a little better than my Bronx accent. "The sails come loose. We'll capsize if it's not secured on the boom. Marcel, you take the helm, head her into the wind. Careful, Radcliffe, the winds are treacherous." As Jeff went to secure the sail, a wave struck the sailboat, almost laying her over on her side. He slipped to the surface, striking his head on the deck. But the safety line, which was connected to his life jacket and harness, kept him from being swept overboard. Grabbing the railing along the side of the boat, he pulled himself up on his knees. Rain was pelting him in the face, and he was unable to see for a moment. Either rain or blood was blinding him. On his hands and knees, he crawled toward the center of the boat. Lightning struck the surface of the ocean, illuminating the deck. The sail was in reach. Struggling with a tie-down rope, Jeff wrapped it around the boom, binding the sail. Another wave swept across the deck, almost knocking him down again. He carefully returned to the helm where Marcel Renault awaited him. "Mon Dieu, I have never seen the likes of this kind of storm," Marcel yelled above the driving wind and rain. Jeff rubbed his hand across his forehead which still stung from the blow to his head. Even in the darkness, he realized that blood and not rain was spilling off his brow. Wiping the corner of his mouth, Jeff tasted iron from his blood. He descended into the cockpit, sloshing through seawater, and grabbed a towel from the galley. Putting it tightly against his forehead, he tried to stop the flow of blood that was numbing his thinking. Stumbling back through the flooded cabin, he returned to the helm where Marcel was at the controls. "Are you all right?" Marcel cried out. "I've hit my head." "Go down below. I will call you if I need help. I have the Alina under diesel power." "No, I'll stay with you on deck." "What, do you have a death wish? A head injury can be a dangerous thing," Marcel pointed to the cabin. "Go now. I will call you if I need you." Jeff descended back to the cabin and went to one of the bunks. He used a rope to tie himself in and press the towel against the cut on his forehead. The sailboat pitched to one side, almost keeling over. As it came back upright, he remembered another storm from his youth that had caused the deaths of people he loved. Pain racked his brain, and he struggled to stay awake. He heard cries for help, but they were from long ago. Darkness was closing in on him, and he could barely think. His last thoughts before passing out: "I want to change my life for the better." "Radcliffe, wake up! You have been out cold for 8 hours." The French accented voice was at first unfamiliar, but concentrating, Jeff remembered that he was with Marcel Renault. He opened his eyes and then squinted as diffuse daylight blinded him. Marcel was sitting across from him on another bunk. As he became conscious, Jeff studied Marcel's face. He has a Roman nose, bent slightly to one side, probably broken at some point. Dark hair, full of curls and lines under those brown eyes. Worry lines? A deep furrow between his eyebrows. "Man, you are worried about something," Jeff thought. Putting his hand to his forehead, Jeff winced from the feel of the injury to his head. "What happened to me?" "Do you remember the storm from last night?" "Yes." "I'm afraid you had a fall on deck and got quite a blow to the head. I have done the best I could to stitch you up, but I think you should see a doctor. There is just one problem. We seem to be stuck on a reef." "I am afraid the Alina has a rupture in her hull. She is like you, cracked open." He smirked, waving his hand up to his head. "She will have to be scuttled." "I'm sorry, Marcel." He shook his head. "We are unable to control the acts of God. For now, we are fortunate to be stuck on a reef. I tell you, there were times last night I thought we were done for." Deep wrinkles formed on his forehead. "The storm has pushed us southwest. One thing is for certain, we are not off Trinidad." "Where are we then?" "Off the coast of South America, Venezuela. I've put out a mayday call, but I am trying to be conservative with battery power." Jeff sat up on the bunk and a feeling of dizziness overcame him. He rested his head on his hand. "Please don't try and get up. There is nothing you can do." Jeff slowly looked up at him. "I wish to ask you something," Marcel said as he raised his eyebrows. "Go ahead." "I know that you have recently had a severe hurricane in your area of Les États-Unis. I mean the United States. How did your family and properties fare?" "I don't know." "That's odd," Marcel murmured. "What did you say?" "Nothing. When you unexpectedly showed up in St. John and asked to accompany me to Trinidad, I was surprised. I had already planned to relocate, so the pleasure of your company was of course welcome." Marcel ran his fingers through his dark curls. "We know very little of each other except for competing in yacht races. You have always been, shall I say, charismatic. Now you seem very depressed. I have heard you cry out in your sleep several times. Is there anything you'd like to discuss?" "What? Me? Trust an old pirate like you? You wound me. I'll bet." Their eyes met. "Radcliffe, just remember, the darkest hours are just before the dawn." A wave rocked the boat and she shuddered and groaned like a wounded animal before settling back on the reef. "Well, what do you think? Would you like to know more? I hope." Okay, I'm going to close with my favorite real estate story. As they walked away, Jeff turned and winked at Cooper and Mills. The rest of the afternoon, Mills talked with guests and found herself comfortable in the company of Ann Jefferson and her husband. Jeff joined them and began to tell real estate stories. Jeff has an excellent sense of humor, a side I haven't really seen. I expected to do several real estate transactions with the Andersons, so after the closing I called my florist and I asked him to send them an arrangement. A couple of days later, Randolph Anderson phoned to thank me for the flowers, but he said the florist had gotten my order confused with someone else's. He said, Jeff, the flowers that came to us had a note of sympathy for the loss of a loved one. Well, I was furious with the florist because I had done so much business with him. When I got him on the telephone, he said, you think the Andersons were upset? You should have heard from the folks at the funeral home. The note on the flowers that went to the family of the deceased read, welcome to your new home. I knew I could get a laugh out of y'all. Thank you, and that's all.
Except that she brought some books.
Yes,
I told her we're mostly men and men don't read, but she had the perfect answer. Take one home to your wife. So they're $20 a piece, and if you want to come up here, she'll write something, whatever you tell her, I guess, or something very appropriate. So anyway, thank you so very much. I learned a lot and enjoyed it.
I'm so glad you did.
And it's been a long time since someone's read to me. Plus, on your tables, there's a little bookmark if you want to take it with you. I guess they're for everybody, right?
Absolutely. Thank you all so much.
Monica.
Okay, I have no idea how to do this. And George, just to prove you wrong, men do read. My husband reads.